Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in here to the Go Powercat Questions Podcast. Fitz is on vacation, so he has left the podcasting duties to myself, Cole Carmody, and of course, my good dear friend and everybody's dearest friend, Ryan Gilbert. And before we start, it is worth noting Ryan is a world traveler. Not only was he in Frisco for Big 12 Media Days, but he also was in Nashville. And I don't know what is more fun, Frisco or Nashville, but because he doesn't have much of a voice, he told me that he wanted me to host. So I know everybody tuned in wanting to hear Ryan, but you're going to have to deal with me. But Gilbert, how was your traveling extravaganza?
It was good, man. It was a lot of fun. I know that, you say Frisco and Nashville. Well, I had Fitz with me in Frisco. I didn't have Fitz with me in Nashville. So it's a give and take there. But for those who don't know, there's a lot of music in Nashville. That might come as a surprise to some. But Gilbert, there was a question, actually. I didn't include it, but there was a question about our favorite memories as roommates together, Cole. And I like to sing, I like to sing along to the songs I like. And so my voice is getting a lot better. But over the last couple of days, it's been rough.
And for the folks who don't know, yes, Ryan and I used to be roommates. But another little known fact is we also used to be on the same radio show at the K-State radio station. 2019 is the first time that the airwaves unfortunately had to hear our voices. So kind of a full circle moment. Here we are, the start of the 2025 season with football back and doing it again. Before we get started, we do want to give a very special shout out to our friends at Helping Hands Remodeling, mhkremodeler.com. If you need any bathroom work, if you need any deck work, make sure you go check out them. They worked on Fitz's house. I'm very excited to see it, assuming I get invited when football season rolls around. But it is football season, Gilbert, which means we have our questions from Wabash Station. As you mentioned, it was Big 12 Media Days. If you haven't seen the podcast from Big 12 Media Days, go check that out. Ryan and Fitz and John Grove and Brian Hanley did an excellent job. There was no question. So this is our first questions since Big 12 Media Day. And right on cue from Doug142, was there anything new that you learned about K-State at Big 12 Media Days? Mr. Gilbert, did you learn anything new?
Well, yeah, a couple names really got thrown out that maybe some weren't expecting. And this is something we talked about on the podcast when we were in Frisco, but Ryan Davis is just a great example of the depth in that defensive end room. And, it sounds like he's going to play. I know how much is he going to play and how many snaps will he get? That's obviously to be determined, but yeah, that was somebody that we weren't really expecting to be a prominent player in this defense, but that was probably the biggest, thing that was learned, right? There's a lot of information that you're kind of soaking in. And, I know our competition does a great job. Fitz interviewed players and stuff. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that you can kind of dissect, but, a couple names popped up and Ryan Davis was absolutely one of them.
And I wasn't there, but I did consume a lot of media, probably like a lot of people listening to this show. And I found it interesting, the takes on Dublin, Ryan. I was really interested to hear what they were going to talk about because, again, we've been looking at it from just a K-State perspective and maybe not so much a Big 12 and an Iowa State perspective. But, man, listening to Commissioner Yormark talk about that game, it's very clear that they want to be center stage. And this game is a big deal, not just for K-State and Iowa State, but it's a big deal for the conference. And so I felt like I knew that, but then hearing the commissioner talk about that, to me, really, really put an emphasis on, oh, wow, it is right around the corner and it's a big deal. And, you listen to them talk and you're like, okay, is this going to be something that they try and do every single year? I don't know. I do know that TCU is going to be there next year. I don't know your thoughts on this, Gilbert, but I could really see the Big 12 trying to open the year in Dublin every single year if that's something that they can get worked out.
I do wonder if there's a preference on, do you want it to be a Big 12 game or do you want it to be TCU? Who's TCU plays at Virginia Tech? Is that right?
North Carolina.
Okay. So that is, there's pros and cons to that, but there's not a 100% certainty that a Big 12 team is going to lose when it's just one Big 12 team. So that's interesting, right? TCU can put on a better showing for the Big 12, whereas, yeah, if it's a good game out in Dublin a month from now, everybody's going to be excited and entertained with that. But there is still going to be a loser in the Big 12 who's going to have, a lower hand in the standings for the rest of the year. Not a make or break game. I think we've harped on that enough where, Kansas State, Chris Kleiman has proven he can lose to a team like Tulane and still win the Big 12. So it is not a make or break game. I can't stress that enough. I'm sure you are probably in the same ballpark there, Cole, but one team is going to lose in the Big 12. And so moving forward, it's if you have TCU out there and they win, that's a much better look, in my opinion, for the Big 12, even if it's, maybe not as good of a game.
Right.
You go to December and when the selections and all the rankings are starting to come out and maybe there's a heated debate here about the Big 12 or the ACC. Well, hey, look at this Big 12 team. Just beat this ACC team. Whereas, Kansas State and Iowa State playing, it's a great way for the Big 12 to kind of show off their brand. But, you're not putting your top teams, and Iowa State's supposed to be top teams against other conferences.
I agree with that. I found it interesting, though. Chris Kleiman and Matt Campbell both brought up the whole notion of, we got to move on after this game. Like, it's cool, but it's not a bowl game. And Chris Kleiman said, you got 11 more of these suckers afterwards. And I know that that's not what the fans wanted to hear. And there was probably I know there was some pushback from some fans who were a little frustrated that, it sounds like, oh, Chris Kleiman's making excuses for if they lose. That's not what he's saying. But again, this is no different than if K-State opened Big 12 with a loss. And I'd have to go back and look at how many times K-State's opened Big 12 with a loss, Big 12 play with a loss, and still had a pretty successful season. I would imagine that's happened before, considering how many times K-State opened on the road. But this is a Big 12 opener. They're still going to get that non-con in front of them. So it was interesting to hear both coaches kind of have the same perspective on that. And honestly, I wasn't too surprised because if you put too much of an emphasis on it, you don't want to have that inevitable letdown when you come back to the States.
It's a month away, man. Well, me and Fitz, I don't know when you're flying out, Cole. Me and Fitz fly out on the 16th. So by the time this goes up, it'll be a month away. So, man, I can't wait to be in a hotel room with Fitz for a week.
Well, you know what? I can, because I'm not doing that. Next question here. The media's focus on K-State this year seems to be all on offense. There is not much interest and respect for the defense. Will the defense this year be better than last year? From BJagW1971. Gilbert, what are your thoughts on this? I don't necessarily know if the media's focus is totally on the offense. Is that maybe because that there's a new offensive coordinator? Is that what it feels like that? I guess I can understand where this is coming from, but I think the defense is getting its fair share of respect.
What's the easiest thing to talk about? And not that we're clickbaity here, but what's going to get the most clicks, right? What do people want to hear about most? I mean, it's Avery Johnson, it's the offense, it's the skill players, it's the playmakers. And so I don't know if subconsciously or consciously that's a narrative that's been pushed by us or the entirety of the beat. But I mean, I think naturally the offense just kind of gets probably a little more notoriety than the defense. That's just kind of how it goes in all of sport, collegiate, professional. Yeah. The offense is what's more glamorous, but the defense, I think there's a lot better depth on this defensive group. we touched on the defensive ends with Ryan Davis just a minute ago. There seems to be a lot more depth. Now that top end talent, you're losing a couple of NFL guys. I think it was Chris Kleiman on the stage said there were 3 NFL guys that they lost. And I think I was with Big B and we're like, what? Like Parrish, Siegel, Keenan Garber. I think he's technically, I think it was the Vikings. We looked it up. So technically, you do lose, I guess, technically 3 NFL guys, but realistically 2, guys who are going to play in the league. Right. And so you lose that top end talent. And so the door is open for some leaders to emerge on that side of the ball. But you look at from top to bottom, the depth, how deep some of these rooms are. K-State can probably withstand some injuries better, more equipped to withstand some adversity this year compared to last year, just because, man, you've got a lot of depth at a lot of different positions.
Is that depth or is it we don't really know what they have? I mean, like I look at the secondary and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of guys who can play there. And you would hope that some of those guys separate themselves from others. This is a conversation that Kansas City Sports Talk Radio has been having for a long time in regards to the Chiefs. Okay, they have 2 guys who can play left tackle. Well, they want somebody to win that job at left tackle. You don't want to just, if you're K-State, roll into week 1 with a plethora of cornerbacks and have to rotate them in. Ideally, at least in my mind, you want 2 or 3 guys to step up and be the guys who say, we are the ones who are going to win this job. And maybe that happens. And maybe the guys behind them are not that far behind him. But the reality is, are they good enough to where we look at them and say, these are going to be impact difference makers? I don't know. They have a lot of guys who can play that spot, but do they have a lot of guys who can play that spot well? I don't know the answer to that question yet. I believe that Donovan McIntosh is going to be really good. I believe Zayshawn Ritz has the tools to be really good. Same thing with Jaden Rowe. But until I see it on the field, I'm going to wait. And we always talk about selling, buying, or holding. Right now, I'm going to hold if I have stock on the secondary, because that's really the only spot that we're talking about. You brought up the defensive line. I'm not worried about the defensive line. I think that defensive line room is the best that it's been in a really long time under Chris Kleiman. I'm really not worried about the linebackers. People haven't talked about Bo Palmer coming back. I understand, but he has been a leader, and he's been a person who has been that depth, as you mentioned, in that linebacking room. So I look at the secondary right now as my biggest question mark, not just on the defense, but on the whole team. And so, yes, there's depth, but is it good depth? That's really the question.
Sure. And I guess really cornerback, because like VJ Payne, we all think the world of him, a lightning quick guy, and Maldonado on paper, you're thinking is going to be great, but does not have the greatest track record as far as staying healthy. That's not a knock on him. That's just kind of the reality of it. So staying healthy is obviously going to be key, but yeah, cornerbacks, I really are probably going to be the one to watch. But you look at that bowl game, man. I mean, Chris Kleiman loves to give his guys valuable experience, and some of these guys you're going to hope are not being thrown into the fire, but have gotten a little taste of it so far.
And let's not forget that Rutgers had some good receivers. Those were some really good receivers that Rutgers had. I'm with you. That makes me, if there's anything that makes me feel better, it is that bowl game, because I do believe those guys can step up. Next
Speaking of the bowl game, real quick, back to what you mentioned earlier about the Ireland game. Like, I don't even think there's like a media availability for us or anything. There might be one little thing that Lackey puts up for us, but like, it is not a fun trip. It is a business trip, right? And before, it's so important to lock in, but dude, after, it's even more important for this team to turn around and play a whole week, 1 week later.
It would be very hard to turn around and play Army. I'd be very worried about that game if that was the second game. The fact that it's North Dakota makes it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Still, you're right. Game week when you get back. No doubt about it. Next question here from Yeehaw Ema. He says, will we get closer to being back to special teams U this year, and who will handle the kickoff returns and punt returns? I think there's a lot that goes into this, Ryan. Like, in order to be good at special teams, you have to be good at all different phases. It's not just the kick returns and the punt returns. That's what people see. That's the glamorous side of things. Everybody likes it when you score points. But to me, that part of the game is being phased out, because these punters are so good. These guys kick the ball out of the back of the end zone on regular occasion. So to me, it's everything else. I don't know where you fall on this, but this is a really good question.
Yeah. Trying to remember back to last year. There's Dylan Edwards had a punt return against Arizona.
Yes.
Was there any other kind of big splash play that K-State had? Probably not, but go to Houston and the field goal botches, and they happened in Ames against Iowa State, right?
Yep.
BYU, the whole debacle. There was a lot of things that went wrong in Provo. Special teams is in that mix, though. And, so the big splash plays K-State, lost. But even just the little, a block here, a holding call there, man, those can really, change field position and change a game. So, yeah, everybody's going to remember those big plays, of course. But yeah, it's a collective. From top to bottom, K-State was beat on special teams. It was a negative for the team in 2024. And for special teams, to get back to it, I don't know if I can give an answer where, K-State get closer back to being special teams but they have to. They absolutely have to. And unless Avery Johnson's a Heisman winner and the offense puts up, 70 points a game, you're going to need to give yourself that edge. You're gonna have to give yourself that edge in some of these games. And traditionally, man, K-State's been the program to do that. Last year was not the case, and a lot of things, went into that. I don't want to call it a letdown, or meltdown, but at the end of the year, where K-State kind of stumbled and lost, what was it, 3 or 4 K-State maybe ran out of gas, what have you. Special teams were not pretty over that last month of the year, especially in the kicking game. And there was a question about kickers in Ireland. I didn't include it, but there's some stuff up in the air. Kick returners, punt returners, man. K-State teetered with Edwards and Lockett. Like, they're going to do, I think, some different things at that position. It's not just going to be a one-man job.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I think Sterling Lockett's going to be that guy. I really believe that they want to get him involved, and I think getting him back there on punt returns specifically. You think back to the NFL, Ryan. I know you follow the NFL, but there's not very many big time playmakers on offense that are punt returners. Like, I actually looked this up because I was worried about it for the Chiefs, and it's like, okay, you go back and you look. There's no wide receiver ones. There's no wide receiver twos who are consistently returning punts. Now, every once in a while, you might have your Tyreek Hills go back there for a big play, but that's not going to happen. So I really don't know how much Dylan Edwards is going to get back there, especially if he is, the bell cow at running back like we think. So I think it's going to be up to Sterling Lockett to kind of step up. And I think he can do it. I mean, if there's anybody who can do it, the Lockett family name surely holds a little bit of weight in special teams. It'll be kind of cool to see that if that's indeed what ends up being the case. But, I look at the depth that this team has, and you and I have talked about this, but the depth that this team has, right? You would think, theoretically, if they have all this depth, that those guys, if they're not playing, Gilbert, where would they play? Special teams. If they're not playing, I see what you're saying. If they're not playing on defense, on offense, they're going to play special teams. So if we think that K-State has all this depth, shouldn't that translate to special teams? In my mind, the answer to that question should be yes. So if you're just looking at it from that, I would expect K-State to take a step forward with special teams. In my mind, if those guys are bought in, and if, by all accounts, we've heard that they've spent a lot of time trying to improve in that area, you would think that depth should help them this year in that area of special teams.
Yeah, that's an easy way to earn yourself some playing time on offense or defense. Hey, I can prove I can make plays on special teams. If I'm a defensive player, all right, I can fundamentally tackle somebody, right? I can block it, what have you. That's an easy way to get on the coach's good side, is on special teams for sure. And I mean, it can be offense, defense, man. Like, it's not out of the ordinary for a defensive back to be a returner. I mean, we've seen that a lot in football.
Over under 2.5 returns for touchdowns this year.
I feel like I've got to go under, man. I feel like I've got to go under now. Like, I feel like I've become the new Wally here. Like, I think on a scale of 1 to 10 at media days on that podcast we did, I gave it like a 3 for K-State to make it to Arlington. Everybody else, I think, was like a 5 or above. But I need to see it first for K-State special teams to prove that last year was maybe a fluke. But I don't know if last year was a fluke. Like, it's been building up for a couple of years where special teams just hasn't been up to maybe K-State's standard where it wants it to be.
It reared its ugly head. I thought, honestly, for the most part, the special teams were really good, but when they were bad, they were really bad, right? It wasn't a holding call here or there. It was a snap that was way over the holder's head. It was 2 returns for touchdowns. Was it 2 in the BYU game that they let up? Or maybe it was just 1, but either way, like, they gave up the plays that you just can't have. So eliminating the mistakes maybe is more important than getting the splash plays. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but
I don't know who you might have analyzed it more than me, but if it was on the snapper or the holder, but if there's one player last year that K-State needed, if they could have resurrected to be on last year's squad, have been Brandon Plattner.
100%. Next question here comes from Powercat. He asks, who are the wide receivers 4, 5, and 6 this year? And what are the chances that Lincoln Kier is wide receiver 4 by the end of the year, from Powercat?
Well, the tight ends are tight ends, right? They're listed as tight ends, but not every tight end is going to only be out there in like a 13 personnel set. Right? These guys can catch passes. Kier is probably the most similar to a wideout, right? I think we can agree on that, but you got to throw the tight ends into this mix as well. So even if it is just, Jason, Tibbs, and Bradley, and then it's the rest of the tight ends, I'm not sure if that's that big of a deal. Now, if there's injuries, right, you're going to need some depth there. Like, Fitz, if you're watching this, Fitz, the title of this show has got to be about depth on the team.
That's right.
Talking about this, but I'm not sure. Wideout depth, like, you look at the wideout position for the last several years. Kansas State's been able to win games without flashy plays from the wideout spot. So, but you're going to need a wideout who, if Jace Brown goes out, you need Tibbs or Bradley to step up. That would probably be my number one concern in this wideout group, rather than who's going to be the 4 and 5 and 6. I think Jace has kind of taken on that role as the 1, and that's fine. You can have your 2 and 3, Tibbs and Bradley, however you want to cut that. But if Brown goes out, you got to have a wide receiver 1. Somebody's got to step in and be that. You're down on the road at Colorado, 2 minutes left. Who's going to go out and catch that ball? Jace Brown's proven he can do that. If he goes out, you're going to need somebody to step up. So Bradley and Tibbs, if Brown's healthy, they're still important. But if something's to happen there, he's going to need, or Chris Kleiman is going to need somebody to step up at that wideout spot.
Yeah, I think it's less about who's going to be 4, 5, and 6 and who the hell's going to be number 2. Like, I know everybody is saying that Jaron Bradley and Jerron Tibbs are going to be those 2 and 3 guys. I think that's definitely a possibility, but they're not going to be shoe-ins to get the second most receptions at the wideout spot and the third most receptions at the wideout spot. I really believe that they're going to try and work some of these guys in. Don't sleep on a guy by the name of J.D. Davis. This is a guy who they brought in from the junior college ranks. He was a big-time game breaker last year at his junior college. And, you don't bring in a junior college guy unless you think that there's something there, because he's got 2 years left. So I'm interested to see. I think he might be a guy who could kind of crack the rotation at the end of the year. You're asking for 4, 5, 6. I do believe that it'll go Brown and Bradley Tibbs. If we're talking about 4, 5, 6, I think J.D. Davis has an opportunity to crack that. But I'm also looking at a guy like Caleb Medford. A guy has got 1 year, transferred from New Mexico, another transfer who people are kind of sleeping on. Right? You're not bringing in 3 receivers unless you're going to try and play them. Like, that's just not something that's going to happen, because if you bring in guys, inevitably you will run out guys. That's what happened. Trey Davis, true freshman, transfers when Caleb Medford comes in, because they think that, okay, well, what we can get from 1 year from Medford would be more than what we could get for 3 years from Davis. I don't know if that's the thinking, but it's got to be something like that. So I think Caleb Medford factors into that equation. And honestly, Sterling Lockett, he still has an uphill battle, I think, to try and crack that rotation. Maybe he rotates in as a slot guy, but there's just not a lot of receivers that are built like him. And so I'll be interested to see how that happens. But one guy, Gilbert, who I'm really looking at is Larry Porter. And that's a guy who I've banged the table for with my fist over and over as I just shook the camera. But I get so fired up talking about this guy. He is a playmaker. He was severely, severely underrated and under-recruited. And Ryan Wallace would not stop talking about him. And I watched his tape and I get it. This guy's a baller. And so I think Larry Porter, if he doesn't play, he'll redshirt, but he will get into some games this year. So I know I rattle off some names there, but I don't know about you, man. I'm still very skeptical that this position is going to be fixed. I think that there's good players there, but just because they have good players there doesn't mean it's going to click. They need it to click, though, man. Like, they really need it to click.
Yeah, if you want to take that next step as a program in general, wideout position has to be better on a year in and year out basis. But Cole, you remember a couple weeks ago we talked about like the 2012 year. That year it was Lockett, Jermaine Thompson, and Chris Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was just a massive drop off at that wideout spot. And Tannehill was in there too, catching passes as a tight end. But like over the last several years here in Manhattan, dude, it's been like Dante Cephas was just as close to being a 3 as he was a 6. Same thing with Jaden Jackson. And you go out the last couple of years, maybe Ty Bowman was truly like at that like 5-6 spot. But there's guys that teeter-totter. And you can make arguments even on like a game-by-game basis, like, oh, they were the wideout 2 in this game, and then the next game they don't even see a pass. And so it's tough to label any of these guys as far as like an unofficial depth chart goes, just because it's fluctuated so much. Whereas I think you mentioned Jaden Jackson. I think you talked about this like against West Virginia a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
like if he's doing that every week, he's like the wideout 2, maybe wide receiver 1, but. I mean, that just wasn't the case on a consistent basis. So it's interesting because there's a lot of capable guys here, and it's not just going to be 1, 2, 3, shut the door. Right? These 5, 4, 5, 6 on the depth chart, so to speak, are going to matter a lot, and they're going to be not prominent playmakers in every game, but they're going to have to step up.
If I were to rank, and I want to do this with you, I know this isn't a question on here, but it kind of goes with what we're talking about. If you were to rank guys based off of who you believe is going to have the most receptions at the end of the year, okay, I'll ask you first before I give you my opinion. But does a wide receiver not named Jace Brown crack the top 3 pass catchers in 2025?
Well, Dylan is in that, so there's one left. Dylan's going to be, even if it's a little dump off on if he's getting pressure, he's going to get some passes.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. The tight end group is weird because there's so many of them. Like you think somebody's going to be up there, but there's only so many pieces of the pie to go around. I don't know, man. I mean, sorry, I shook my camera too. Tibbs and Bradley, like you hope they can step up, but there's no proof there. So what do you think? What do you think, Cole?
I believe that Brown's going to have the most receptions. I think Dylan Edwards will be number 2, and I think Garrett Oakley will be number 3. So to answer my question, I think that the targets will be spread out so much amongst Bradley and Tibbs that maybe neither one of those guys emerges as a true, top 3 option in this offense, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, if you have to game plan for 3 receivers, that could actually be very beneficial. So I think that they are going to spread the ball around a lot, but because of that maybe makes the 4th, 5th, and 6th options, not just receivers, maybe not even matter as much.
Yeah. Well, go back to 2012, excuse me. You had 3 dudes and they were dudes. They were awesome. But if you're an opposing defense, you're looking at these 3 guys that we need to scout at the wideout spot for Kansas State. Now, okay, hey, Sterling Lockett, dude, you're not going to be a big prominent wideout this year, but against, I don't know, TCU, I'm completely making this up. They don't have great speed. You can blow by these guys. We're going to need you in this game. I think you've got enough, depth, right? We talked about that versatility with different guys to where it might depend on just like a game by game basis. Like I'd love to know if Jaden Jackson was a coincidence against West Virginia, or if there was really something there that K-State was able to expose. So there's enough weapons there that depending on what defenses throw at you or what their strengths are, you can kind of counter that.
Matt Wells definitely has a lot of tools in his toolbox to use. I think that's maybe the biggest difference this year as opposed to last year. All right. We ready for the last question?
Is that it? Yeah, you're right. Okay.
We've got one more question. Yep. The guy who picks out the questions doesn't even know how many there are.
Time is flying by, man. We're just having so much fun without the boss.
That's right. As one of our wonderful subscribers, King Jim, said, when the Fitz is away, the mice will play, and we are the mice. Here we go. The next question and final question of the podcast: should college sports drop overtime and happily settle for ties, possibly reducing the injuries because they're playing more games than in the past? It's aim BB. I don't know about you, Gilbert, but I'm not a big proponent of the ties. I'm curious as your opinion on this question.
You know me, the NFL guy, right? The NFL has a set schedule, set standings, and 7 teams now get into the playoffs based off of your standings, right?
Mm-hmm.
College football is more subjective, and so wins and losses obviously matter a ton. But if you tie, it doesn't mean the exact same as a tie in the NFL, right? Now, I know that depending on what model, this is probably my answer. It depends on what model you go to for the selection process, right? But a team, you could still think a team, you could ding a team for a tie. If you're a Big 12 team, the committee's going to say, oh, that's a tie. If you're an SEC team, oh, they didn't lose. Right. So It depends how you look at it. There is a lot of, like I said, it's subjective, but NFL, ties are maybe okay because the standings are the standings, and that's how it's going to work itself out. In college, man, when there's people evaluating you, I guess is the best way to put it with the committee, ties can either hurt you or they can help you, but it's not the end all be all. Whereas the NFL, a tie is a tie. In college, a tie would be, hey, it's just one game on your 12, 13 game sample size to judge you off of and to measure you off of. So depends how, it depends what goes on in the future of the selection committee and the format and all that stuff in the CFP.
If that were to happen, if ties were to happen, all it would do is it open the door for a bunch of ifs for the selection committee. If ifs, ands, and buts were candy and nuts, then we'd all have a Merry Christmas, Ryan Gilbert. I do not want ties in college football. I understand the basis of this question because really what this is doing is this is opening the door for a larger conversation about college football playoff. And I know you guys talked about that at length on the last podcast, but I do believe that right now we're at a stage where it's a strange part in the sport because we want expansion, but what happens when you have expansion is I feel like it takes the emphasis of the every game matters away. And so if a team were to tie in a 16-team playoff, it's, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. If they would have made this kick, then they would have won. So we should judge them on that. And at that point, I say, then why are we not even, as Brett Yormark wants to talk about, proving it on the field? Well, the games don't even matter at that point. Wins and losses should matter. And I feel like, unfortunately, if there were ties, then it would just very much lessen the emphasis on the actual results of the contest. So, I think that I don't care, quite honestly, that, they're playing more games. They're doing that to themselves. Like, that's what college football decided to do. And if injuries happen, then it's part of football. It's going to happen. But no, I don't think ties should be anywhere near college football. I don't think ties, quite frankly, should be anywhere near the NFL. I don't understand that. Now, I'll bring this question back up here because it says drop overtime. Now, I do think there's some basis to you can only play a certain amount of overtimes, like in the NFL. They do tie in the NFL, but it's because they play a certain amount of overtimes. After they get to that point in college football where they're just going back and forth with 2-point conversions, man, like I don't understand. And maybe that's the next part of this conversation, Ryan. But I don't really understand that part of it.
If you're just doing one play per team, offensively and defensively per overtime, you are reducing the wear and tear. You're reducing the injury risk. I do think it's funny, I'm sure it's probably a very small fraction of a percentage, but like a 2-point conversion play probably has a higher injury rate than a 1st and 10 from the 25. Anyways, but you are shortening it that way, right? You are going one play per overtime. Whereas if you're starting from the 25, that could be anywhere from 1 to, 8, 10 plays. So you are reducing it in that regard. So you're taking a step forward in terms of player safety. I get it, man. The 2 overtime thing or the 2-point conversion thing at overtime is polarizing and it's weird. It's very weird. What was that? Penn State, Illinois, I think a number of years ago where they went.
Georgia Tech and Georgia last year.
So it's weird, but you're reducing the injury risk there that way. So it's kind of maybe the best of both worlds. Yeah, you can still have overtime and go on for as long as you want, but if it's only one play per overtime round, then you're reducing the injury risk as much as you can. So there's no perfect way, but I understand the way it's set up now.
Think about it this way. If Georgia were to have tied that game against Georgia Tech last year, they still would have gotten into the college football playoff. They would have gladly taken a tie. They would have walked out of their merry way. And for Georgia Tech, it wouldn't have mattered. Winning or losing that game didn't matter. They were still going to go to whatever heck bowl game they were going to go to, the no playoff implications. But if Georgia loses that game, if Georgia Tech, they had multiple opportunities to win. If Georgia Tech makes one play, if they get 3 yards and they win that game, Georgia might lose out on a college football playoff opportunity. So I understand the question. I really do. And I still don't want any ties, but I would not be opposed to reformatting this overtime structure because, I still think that we should try and find a true winner and a true loser. And I don't know if the overtime college football does that right now. I know it's fun. I get that it's fun, but I don't know if it really determines a true winner and loser.
You know what bugs me is when you look up like K-State's record from 100 years ago and, they went 4-3-2. Yeah. Like it's just something about it bugs me. So I'm pro, or I guess I'm anti-tie for that reason. I want to see a 8-4. I don't want a 0, or I don't want a 1. I want a 0 at the end of that. I don't want a tie.
What do we think that the boss is doing right now?
I think he's probably still on the road with Becky, I would assume. Is he with Ethan too? I think they were texting in the group. Are they riding together?
Oh boy, I don't know. That's a lot of Fitzgeralds in one car.
We say vacation, right? It's a family reunion. And I know Fitz loves his family, but he's more or less with the family this week.
That's good.
Spending quality time with those he loves.
Nothing wrong with that. You know what else's family is? MHK Remodeler.
That was a really good transition.
Thank you. As we wind down this podcast, if you are looking for any kind of remodeling, make sure you check out Gabriel Helping Hands Remodeling LLC, MHK Remodeler. If you are around the city of Manhattan, make sure you do that. We all know construction is going to be everywhere this fall because they love to do construction in the city of Manhattan. So get your construction done before the road construction starts. MHKRemodeler.com. For Ryan Gilbert, I am Cole Carmody. Thanks everybody so much for watching. We will talk to you next week.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.